Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Terra podcast. And as promised, my 25-year anniversary retrospective on Power Rangers Turbo. I apologize for not doing this retrospective sooner, following my retrospective on Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. So for those, I have to refresh for those who watched my retrospective on the movie. I have to remind everybody that 2022 is the 25th anniversary of Power Rangers Turbo, and so is the 20th anniversary of Power Rangers Wild Force, the 15th anniversary of Power Rangers Operation Overdrive, which in itself was the 15th anniversary of Power Rangers 15 years ago in 2007, and 10 years since Power Rangers Samurai's second season, Power Rangers Super Samurai, had aired. And it's been 5 years since the first season of Power Rangers Ninja Steel and its airing. Wow, that's a mouthful. But anyway, we want to. I'm not talking about any of those seasons to celebrate their respective anniversaries before 2022 is up. We're here to talk about Turbo itself because it's a season of Power Rangers that I've talked about here and there, but not a lot, a lot of the time, because it's a Power Ranger season that warrants my attention again, because I have discussed Turbo in retrospectives in the past, but I don't think a lot of my past retrospective recordings have caught on with a lot of those when I started the channel over the last 10 years. But now 10 years later, in my 10th anniversary on YouTube, it's time I talked about Turbo a little bit, but mainly discussing about the hatred this season has received over the last 25 years, ranging from anybody I know personally that's a Power Rangers fan but hates Turbo with a burning passion, to Power Ranger superfans like Linkara when discussing history of Power Rangers on Turbo, but that's his opinion if he doesn't like Turbo. And same go for any Power Rangers fan who doesn't like it. Now, I, for one, feel as though that Power Rangers Turbo is not that bad. It's not that hated anymore. But at one point, there's just some things from Turbo that I find annoying, and some things that I wish they could have done differently. And, over the course of 25 years since this season, yeah, Turbo may be Power Rangers' first worst season, but there have been way worser seasons than Turbo over the last 25 years at this point. And man, when we get to 2027 in the next less than 5 years from now, Turbo will be 30 years old. And even by the point when Power Rangers Turbo does turn 30, it will still be regarded as one of the worst Power Ranger seasons and one of the most hated seasons of all time. Personally, I feel like as though there are way worser seasons down the line, like I said, than Turbo. Like Operation Overdrive. I mean, again, I have rewatched Operation Overdrive recently. Yeah, it's still a bad season like Turbo, but there's some things to like about Operation Overdrive, but there's still a lot of things that weigh Operation Overdrive down for people like me. Yes, there are seasons like Samurai, Megaforce, and Ninja Steel, and even those seasons are way bad or worse than Turbo, even though most say a lot of 100% or infinite percent amount of Power Ranger fans agree that Megaforce is way worse than Turbo. I'm in the minority that despises Ninja Steel as the worst season of Power Rangers ever. And don't you worry, I'm at the time of my recording rewatching Power Rangers before I get the Dino Fury and in time for the 30th anniversary and Cosmic Fury. And when I do get around Ninja Steel, I hopefully in 2023 we'll discuss how much I hate Ninja Steel on the podcast, since I never got to do it when Ninja Steel was airing or waiting until when both seasons had finished. But by that point, I had already been burnt out from ranting and raving about the Neo Saban era anyway. But enough of that. We need to go backwards to the original Saban era with the franchise's first worst season of the show. So, everybody knows about Power Rangers Turbo. It was a season that was notorious for having a child Power Ranger age 12, later 13 since he had a birthday in an episode during the season. We had, we had like a lot of character changes. We had like, we transitioned from Zordon to Demetria, which a lot of people didn't like. We had Alpha 5 being replaced with a very annoying ghetto Jersey Alpha, and another character people didn't like, but Alpha 6 will be swapped out with different voice actresses between Turbo and In Space, with Caterina Luciani doing the voice of Alpha 6 and Turbo, to Wendy Lee, who was, Wendy Lee also did the voice of Scorpina in the Sentai footage of season 1 of Power Rangers, and then Wendy Lee would also do voices of other voiced characters in Power Rangers, especially Alpha 6 during In Space and Lost Galaxy. Ernie's being replaced by Lieutenant Stone, where Lieutenant Stone was previously a police captain of Angel Grove's Junior Patrol that Bulk and Skull was a part of, to his detective agency during Zeo, and then back to the police force, and then later being a vendor for the juice bar after Ernie had been let go after nearly 5 seasons. And I wasn't sure whether if I liked Lieutenant Stone's position during Turbo or not, after being a police captain, later detective. But then retiring both those positions to just, serve smoothies and juices to teenagers at the youth center juice bar. Once the Rangers graduated from high school, mainly Tommy's team, then okay, what's the Rangers going to do next? The season was known for a lot of things. We swapped out Zordon for Demetria, Alpha 5 for Alpha 6, aka Ghetto Alpha. We went from Rita and Zed to the Machine Empire to Divatox, which a lot of fans did not like either. Even though Divatox was still hot, even though, yeah, she can be a pain in the ass sometimes. But then the biggest controversial thing the season was known for, you swapped out Tommy's team for TJ's team without any actual build-up. I mean, it was already bad enough in the movie. They didn't explain what happened to the Zeo powers. Again, there were cut sequences to the movie that Adam and Tanya, like I discussed, if you go back and listen to my fan commentary track for Chasing the Space, which is up on my channel today. You can listen to that while probably also listening to this. Or after listening to my commentary track for Chasing the Space, come back to this video and listen to what I feel about Turbo in general 25 years later. You already listened to my commentary track? Okay, now back to this video. So, I thought about how they should have done things differently if they wanted to make the season just as solid as Mighty Morphin and Zeo. But yeah, Turbo had its moments, but like I said, there are way worser seasons of Power Rangers than this season. I know there's going to be those out there that I'm friends with for a long time that are going to vehemently disagree. That's okay, but gotta realize that, yeah, Turbo was one of the worst Power Ranger shows, but for a long time. But man, I feel like some fans need to reevaluate Turbo, or if they still feel like this season is still one of the most hated on their list, okay, that's good for you. But personally, this is my opinion. If I feel like there's something about Turbo I don't like personally, or there's something I do like about it personally, you don't have to agree with what I have to say here. So when you think about all the things that they did, is when people think of the Zordon era of Power Rangers, most people only talk about Mighty Morphin's 3 seasons, Zeo, in Space. The only 2 seasons that never gets talked about within the Zordon era is the last chunk of season 3, that being the Aquitar Ranger season, miniseries, the Alien Ranger miniseason, and of course Turbo in itself. Because again, Turbo and Alien Rangers, when it comes to these Zordon era teams, Alien Rangers and Turbo are 2 of the most, forgettable or overlooked Power Ranger teams, and no wonder that's why even recently in the Lightning collection as of 2022 at this recording, compared to my last 2 recordings of retrospecting Turbo, where they don't really, it's yeah, we're going to get Blue Centaurian in the Lightning collection, but so with Blue Centaurian and Phantom Ranger out, we're going to get the Turbo team and the villains down the line later. But it's just, I know Hasbro thought, okay, well, since we have a lot of Mighty Morphin, Zeo, and Space love, so it's going to be a while until Hasbro will do Turbo and the Alien Rangers in the Lightning Collection, because I do want to complete all of Power Rangers. I do want to complete mostly the Zordon era characters, Lost in Galaxy's characters included, since Lost in Galaxy kind of does count as a Zordon season and a post-Zordon, and it's still mainly a post-Zordon season given it's the epilogue of that, but also the 90s era of Power Rangers. But Turbo is one of those seasons that I know a lot of people don't like, but, you know, when with the Blue Centaurian coming out in the Lightning Collection, we're going to see the Turbo Rangers finally getting made, and also some representation of them in the Lightning Collection. I don't even know if they'll do, like, you know, for the vehicles for Lightning Collection, if the Turbo Rangers will come with those turbo carts that they had only for 2 episodes or 3 when it was only Tommy's team. TJ's team didn't have the turbo carts. They just only had Lightning Cruiser and Storm Blaster. Maybe down the line in the Lightning Collection, they'll probably do like Lightning Cruiser with TJ as the Red Turbo Ranger and Storm Blaster with Justin as the Blue Turbo Ranger, probably down the line. Because, you know, Turbo and Alien Rangers is up there as 2 of the most overlooked seasons of Power Rangers. No, Alien Rangers is most overly overlooked. It's Turbo that's the most hated of the bunch within the 6 years of the Zordon era. But I also want to talk, but before I get around some of the pros, I still need to nitpick on the cons of the season. Because, man, I've already you know, ripped up the movie apart. So now it's time to talk about Turbo, the show, and about all the cons that outweighed the pros of the show. Well, before I talk about Divatox and Justin and all those other bad things about the show, I do want to talk more about the replacing of characters we had over the course of the 5 years up to this point. Bear in mind, Turbo was the 5th anniversary season of Power Rangers. Actually, if you go by MMPR years, Turbo would be more like 4 years after MMPR premiered. But even though we were going, again, back then, Power Rangers was going by Zoo Ranger years rather than actual MMPR years. So we wouldn't fix that. By the time Samurai and Megaforce came along, we would go by proper MMPR years, since Power Rangers started. But while Turbo may be season 5 of Power Rangers, but it's really technically 4 years since Power Rangers premiered in 97, you know, since 93, but in 97. And it was the 3rd series of Power Rangers, the 3rd series of the Zordon era, since Mighty Morphin lasted 3 long years. So it's really the first series. You know, I'm not going to say first season, first series, but it's just ran over the course of 3 seasons. And Alien Rangers being a part of season 3. Zeo was the 2nd series of Power Rangers, but it's technically season 4, but it was actually 3 years since Power Rangers premiered. And Turbo, 1997, was actually 4 years since Power Rangers premiered in 93, but in 97. Season 5 of the show, 3rd series of the Zordon, is 3rd series produced overall. In Space was the 4th series, but was also the, you know, the 6th season of the show. And in 98, 5 years of Power Rangers, technically. So maybe In Space should have been really the real 5-year anniversary of the show, since after all, In Space was going to be the end of the series at first. But, you know, again, with the replacement of various characters over the years, well, the reason why Ernie was replaced with Lieutenant Stone was because Richard Janelle, for a lot of those who are unaware, the reason why Ernie was not in Turbo was because Richard Janelle, who played Ernie over the course of the 4.5 years of Power Rangers, he had his little cameo in the Turbo movie, but if you can, you know, when he was there, and that was the last time we would see Ernie in anything Turbo, being his little cameo at the end of the Turbo movie, and that was it, basically. But it was never, well, yeah, it was explained by Lieutenant Stone in the episode Shadow Rangers, when Tommy and Kat was wondering where all their stuff went, and seeing that, well, back when Bulk and Skull were still those monkeys in that episode. And Lieutenant Stone, and when Tommy and Kat found a surprise that Lieutenant Stone was replacing Ernie wearing one of Ernie's signature Hawaiian shirts. Yeah, even though Lieutenant Stone didn't look bad in those Hawaiian shirts. And he already explained that, well, he was going, Lieutenant Stone was going to be the new manager of the Juice Bar for now on until the end of the season. But even though Turbo will be the final season, we would include Lieutenant Stone as well as Bulk and Skull with them together. Even though this was his final season with Bulk and Skull, even though Bulk and Skull in themselves, I'll discuss a bit about the cons with them this season. But, Richard Janelle, who played Ernie, well, he was having all kinds of health problems. And a lot of people who didn't know, I had no idea that Ernie's actor in real life was a chain smoker. That would explain why he had those health problems. He was losing weight years after he left Power Rangers until his unfortunate passing in 2008 of a heart attack, I believe. And if I got that right, because that would explain why Ernie was not around for Turbo, sadly. But it seemed to since Turbo was meant to be the season where the Power Rangers graduate from high school, since Teenagers with Attitude is over, sure, you still got the 12-year-old, 13-year-old, but they basically should have went forward with the step of shifting forward into greatness, but then instead we get all this mediocrity as the show plays out following the movie that the show was set up by. And, Ernie's departure is sadly missed because I did like Ernie over the course of Power Rangers. He was a father-like figure to the Rangers when the Rangers would hang out at the youth center and get some smoothies and juices from Ernie whenever they're doing karate tryouts or any other volunteering things, or when they're doing homework for school and stuff. But even then, if Tommy and them would have still stayed around for at least one more full season, or what the Turbo movie should have done, like I said, if you go back to my Turbo movie retrospective, I recorded it back in March, months ago, 6-7 months ago, that maybe the movie should have been the passing of the torch, and Turbo should have started with TJ, Ashley, Cassie, and Carlos with Justin, and Tommy, Tanya, Catherine, and Adam should have retired within the 3-part premiere of the season, but they didn't think about that. But again, let's just say in an alternate version of the Power Rangers multiverse somewhere, if Turbo was done in Power Rangers today, if we did the Turbo movie differently today and the season itself today, that's what the Rangers should have been doing, instead of, let's just have Tommy and them for 19 episodes until they would find replacements. But even though the replacement Rangers would be left unannounced until, passing of the torch, it's time we pass on these Rangers, and actual build-up, which was somewhat a degrading part of the series that pissed off many fans, and why most of those that I'm already aware of, that among my 12 years I've been in the fandom, 10 years if you count being on this channel, where every time I hear Power Ranger fans say they stopped watching after, when Tommy and them left during Turbo. I can see that, because for those who were those 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds and stuff at the time, when I was only 5 years old when these Power Rangers aired, they had already long moved on from Power Rangers, and no wonder that's why they're so hung up on MMPR. But again, gotta realize MMPR is Mighty Morphin is iconic, so I'm not gonna argue with that anymore. But just gotta understand that when those guys left, it was heart-wrenching. Part of me liked Tommy and them when they were the Turbo Rangers. If they would have just not switch out TJ and them right away, but have no choice. But even the cast had admitted their frustrations about it years later. If you go back and watch like Catherine Sutherland and Nakia Baris's video talking about their retrospective on passing the torch on their Power Rangers Playback YouTube channel. Yes, I follow them on Power Rangers Playback on YouTube and on Instagram and wherever. And I even watched how they admitted their sadness of why they had to leave. If you go back and watch their video, I have the link to it. And I just I just wish that if they would have never left, but the producers were like, JDF and Catherine were the ones that wanted to leave, and they would probably only have only Adam and Tanya and Justin with 2 new Rangers. But they were like, screw it, let's replace everybody except Justin. And man, the cast departure, is no worse than when the kids who were watching MMPR back 30 nearly 30 years ago, 29 years ago if you count season 2 in 94. When Rocky, Adam, and Aisha replaced Jason Zacatrini, that was very frustrating for those kids. And while those kids would still watch season 2 and when Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie came out, but if that movie was done differently, if Jason Zacatrini was in the movie, and if the movie was not some separate continuity thing, and if it was canon to the show, and if it was a big event movie to take place within the TV show's realm and not some separate continuity realm they set up, things would have played out differently. Or heck, the Mighty Morphin movie should have been a passing of the torch sort of film, instead of just having Rocky, Adam, and Aisha in the movie with Tommy, Billy, and Kimberly offset, and outright, because, well, hell, the Turbo movie should have been the same thing. And basically, when Saban did these Power Ranger movies with Fox, what they should have did was had these movies, well, instead of having one movie canon to the show and the other being not canon, both movies should have been set up big event films, setting up passing of the torch. But again, we gotta accept Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, and Turbo Power Rangers movie the way they are. It is what it is. But if there was alternate realities, alternate continuities, of this world, and with Power Rangers still existing in all of pop culture, things would have played out differently. Think about the possibilities of different multiverses, and, I'm not going to go full-blown dimensional merge and crap and all that, and dimensional hopping and all that, But yeah, the cast change swap with Tommy's team, well, it took some time for me to get used to, but in those first few episodes when TJ became the new Rangers with Justin, I wasn't feeling the team at first. I would say given until once the Phantom Ranger came along, okay, let's see how far Turbo will get better by this point, because after they had 4 bad episodes with this new team, that being Stitch Witchery, Wheels of Fate, well, even though the only good thing about it was the introduction of Lightning Cruiser and Storm Blaster, and especially the infamous Trouble by the Slice episode where they got baked into that horrific, traumatizing, inducing, baked into a giant pizza thing. And, well, there was also that other episode, the episodes following the Phantom Rangers debut. One episode, Time Freezes Over, and then the episode with, Vanishing Act, where, okay, this is when they were actually getting a little bit better as a team, but those first 3 episodes with TJ's team as the new Rangers, they were pretty bad, and actually, even the one especially, the pizza, them being baked into a pizza thing. Childhood trauma much? But it's just, there were also plans that they had about, like, if they had TJ and Carlos and Ashley, but then also they would have had, instead of Cassie, we could have had Lieutenant Stone's niece Jenny Hunter, who was in an episode, just only one episode, where she was in a competition to be a ballet dancer like Catherine, and she could have been the new Pink Ranger. And I think instead of Cassie, we could have had Lieutenant Stone's niece, because I did say at one point she kind of did, like I said, if you go back to my Turbo movie retrospective video, I did mention about how Lieutenant Stone's niece did resemble a bit like Kimberly in a way, kind of like a split image lookalike of her actress, Kimberly's actress, but and I said she looked more like a proxy Jennifer Love Hewitt lookalike for a Power Rangers cast member. Like I said, Jennifer Love Hewitt is too much of an expensive SAG actress to be a part of Power Rangers, so they had to get some Jennifer Love Hewitt lookalike. I mean, nothing against Cassie. I mean, I like Cassie. I like Patricia Jolie. But if things were played differently, if they had planned that out, like, one of the things I did like about the intended plans for Turbo, while they would still have Justin as the Blue Ranger, but Carlos and Ashley were the ones that were supposed to be the red. Well, Carlos being the Red Ranger, and TJ, originally named Michael, was supposed to be the Green Turbo Ranger. And Ashley would be, still yellow Turbo when they planned this out. And then, Lieutenant Stone's niece would be the Pink Ranger. But they decided to sort it out with Cassie instead. If only if they would find, if any fans would find the actress who was playing Lieutenant Stone's niece for that one-off episode, Cars Attacks. I don't know if she can be found, but if they do, I wouldn't be surprised. But even though a lot of majority of guest actors that have been on Power Rangers, given the fact the franchise have been non-union a lot, and during the Saban era, until like Lost Galaxy, Lightspeed Rescue, and then when they would start hiring those who were part of the Screen Actors Guild, somewhat. But then again, they were going to go with those plans. But I guess we can settle with what we got. And thinking back to the characters that were proxy prototypes of TJ and Carlos, back when Justin was being bullied by those two guys that were prototype Carlos and TJ, and I said back in the retrospective again for the movie, like, I can't imagine TJ and Carlos bullying Justin. Back in the Alarmed and Dangerous episode, when those fire alarms were just on again, off again. Again, it was Divatox doing that. So, but basically, when Justin was being bullied by those two guys that were prototypes of TJ and Carlos, where that one guy that was supposed to be a prototype of Carlos wearing something red, prototype of TJ wearing something green, and yeah, I don't know, and it seemed that like that's what they were trying to set up a little bit, apparently, but I wasn't aware of that back then. But now, the more I rewatched that first chunk of Turbo, yeah, the first half of Turbo was a ratings bomb, but some of those plans they were hinting during that first half of Turbo foreshadowed some of the things they are going to do by the time we got to after the Blue Centaurians debut episode, the Millennium Message, they would mention that stuff. But all in all, the setup of potential new Rangers replacing Tommy and them, it was just upper-handed, and they probably should have did proper build-up rather than, we got some new Rangers to replace them, since the Rangers are well over 18, except Justin, since he was still under 18 at the time. And I felt, it feels like, and then also, I felt like if they're going to still do the teenagers with attitude thing with the new Rangers, like, well, yeah, they're still going to do them with the whole them being in high school, because, again, if you're still in high school, you can't, if you're under the age of 18, you still have to be in high school. If you're over the age of 18, you got to graduate and move on with what's the next step in your life. So, what do you want to do with your life? So, I just feel like they should have did a proper way of transitioning from Tommy's team to TJ's team better. And, because then again, Adam was coaching Carlos on a soccer team after Carlos had long graduated from high school. So when Carlos became a soccer coach for the high school, Carlos was a part of it. And also hinting with Carlos wearing something black and red for his team outfit, there was hints that Carlos could have been the Red Turbo Ranger based on their intended plans. Ashley would remain as the Yellow Ranger, but even though Ashley, as much as I like Ashley, but personally, Tanya has never exchanged one word with Ashley beforehand, because Tanya was doing her thing being a radio DJ. And even Catherine never even knew of Cassie as a person, other than, in passing of the torch when TJ and Cassie saved Catherine from those army of Piranatrons that attacked her and Tommy when they were on a road trip and when they were about to meet the other Rangers at the camping thing that they were doing in the woods. But still. And then TJ and Tommy have exchanged word after even he saved Tommy, because again, he and TJ and Cassie saving Tommy, but again, they just didn't plan this out properly. But you get what I mean. But then you think about like the other switch outs, like of like the powers. Enough about the characters, about what I've discussed, but like of the powers. Like, I feel like they should have explained more of what they did to the Zeo powers a little bit, like I said in the movie retrospective. But in the TV show retrospective, it's like, well, they'll be like, like I said, well, yeah, Zeo was great. Time to move on to shifting the turbo. Get over it. But, like, what if we can't get over it? Because, like, we want answers. What did y'all do with the Zeo powers? Did y'all just retire the Zeonizers and just, like, forget about it? Like, And even like what Linkara said about the Turbo Zords and stuff, like maybe the Turbo Zords should have acted like new Zords for the Zeo Rangers. Maybe Turbo, and even like when Linkara said like even though Saban was forbidden from adapting a Sentai pre-Zoo Rangers, they have to follow what's in order of production from Sentai for Power Rangers. So they could not go back to any other Sentai to be Power Rangers Turbo that isn't Car Ranger. Because yeah, Car Ranger, for all things considered, I've watched Car Ranger. Car Ranger was okay, but like, while it may be slightly better than Turbo for some, but Car Ranger, you can't escape from its idiocy, because knowing the fact Gekasu's Sentai Car Ranger was intended to be a form, a parody and satire of not just Super Sentai, but Japanese pop culture in general, and all the tropes and quips that Japan does in their pop culture, in their film, television, and anime. So what else do you expect from Car Ranger and for Power Rangers to haphazardly, like, adapt from that source of the footage? And maybe I might probably take a word for what Linkara said about about what if Turbo was done differently, if Saban did adapt a Sentai pre-Zoo Rangers for Power Rangers. And, well, for another pre-Zoo Sentai like Turbo Ranger. Now, Turbo Ranger was car themed, but it wasn't like a satire like Car Ranger would be a few years later. Because, Turbo Ranger, well, even though I don't watch a lot of pre-Zoo Sentai because I'm only following the Sentais that we did adapt for Power Rangers, except for those that we've been skipping lately, like, Zenkaiger and Kira Major, even though I'm still not feeling Cosmic Fury touching Q Ranger because, well, But, my point stands with that. But if they had done, like Linkara said, if they had done a Sentai pre-Zoo Rangers for Power Rangers Turbo, like, let's say, Turbo Ranger or Jetman. Well, he only said Jetman. He mentioned Jetman, even though Linkara is not a fan of Sentai. He said this and made point clear when discussing history of Power Rangers. He is not a fan of Sentai. He has zero interest. I, for one, am a fan of Sentai and Power Rangers, but even though I only grew up on Power Rangers first, but sometime down the line I would get into Super Sentai and what they've done better or worse than Power Rangers, as much as Power Rangers done better or worse than Sentai. But both shows have its ups and downs in its own rights, respective own rights, between Japan and America. But if they had done something like Jetman, well, again, Jetman was intended to be, speaking of Jetman, Jetman was intended to be Saban's first modern adaptation basis for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1. But if they had went with Jetman for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, MMPR would never took off the way it would. That would explain, hence why they decided to do only 1992's Kiryu Sentai Zoo Ranger instead. Because if they had done Jetman, which was based on, like, Gotcha Man itself, which was also bird themed, Condor and Eagles and all that. But unfortunately, I don't think it would take off. Even though some elements of Jetman was used in Zoo Ranger, like with the cockpit, for the individual Zords from that Sentai for the Dino Zords for Zoo Ranger and MMPR Season 1. But even though, if they had took some elements of Jetman for Turbo and ignore the goofy aspects of Car Ranger, well, one of the few things I also have to point out about, like, fellow Power Ranger YouTubers that I had followed since my channel's earlier years, like Rick the Barkeep of the Onyx Tavern, and his statements about how much he hates RPM, about how he doesn't like RPM for adapting a Sentai that was too goofy in nature, while RPM was very serious, but they were like, how that is, because, like, well, if you look no further at RPM, well, yeah, I know a vast majority of Power Ranger fans love RPM, but they hate Turbo. But if you look at RPM, well, the reason why it worked for RPM was because, well, some of the aspects of Go Onger did fit RPM's post-apocalyptic theme, but yeah, RPM just ignores the goofy stuff of Go Onger completely. They just make some self-awareness humor out of some of the stuff, and even self-awareness humor stuff out of what Power Rangers had done for 17 years at that point. But that's what made RPM work. The reason why Turbo didn't work, well, let's face it, with Turbo, it was an uphill battle. The half of the production team wanted Turbo to be that mature, epic, serious coming of age story of the Rangers, no longer teenagers with attitude, but yeah, they still had a 13-year-old who somehow amped up to go to high school and skipped middle school for some odd reason. And you know, that's what the show should have been. And if Divatox wasn't stupid, well, yeah, she still had some idiocy, even when we had Carol Hoyt on board as Divatox when Hillary Shepard was on maternity leave, you know, when the season was in production and when those episodes had aired. And if they had done something serious, if they would just drop the silliness of Car Ranger during Turbo would have been another decent season of Power Rangers, but it's not. But then the other half of the production team wants Turbo to embrace the stupidity and the idiocy of Car Ranger, because that's what the Sentai was like. I mean, can you imagine? Now, let's take another season of Power Rangers, especially one that I love talking about a lot to death, Lost Galaxy. Now, suppose if Saban and crew did Lost Galaxy, well, they would still have the Terra Venture stuff and Magna Defender and all of that. Suppose they made Lost Galaxy make fun of Ginga Man, okay? Like, suppose they took what we fans of Power Rangers didn't like out of the Sentai counterpart of Lost Galaxy, like the nature stuff. Suppose Lost Galaxy, while they still had the space opera stuff while combining the mythical elements of the Quasar Sabers and the Galacta Beasts, but suppose they were embracing more of Ginga Man's stuff instead of doing their own stuff. Yeah, but suppose if like Lost Galaxy was a copy and paste of Ginga Man, but they still had the Terra Venture Space Colony theme. But then Lost Galaxy would have been terrible. It would have been sucked. And just like how I feel about Samurai being a copy and paste of Shinkenger, or Wild Force being a copy and paste of Gal Ranger, but they did do more originality with the Sentai footage of Gal Ranger and Wild Force, but when it came to the team up episodes and whatnot, or Cole with the Wild Force writer, if you get what I mean. But if Turbo had skewed away from the idiocy of Car Ranger, but again, they didn't think about it. That's why I think RPM did take the win a little bit, but there's still the downsides of them taking what made RPM somewhat divisive, and why a minority of people hate RPM, while you have a majority of people who love RPM, but then you have a minority of people like me who likes Turbo, as opposed to the vast majority of people who hate Turbo. You get what I mean? Because it feels like Turbo and Power Rangers Turbo and Power Rangers RPM have something in common. Like, but here's the polar opposite. Turbo was 1997 Power Rangers. It was hated by many people, but you have a small minority who likes the season. RPM was 2009 Power Rangers. You have a vast majority of people who love it, and then you have a small minority who hate it. Do the math. Apples and oranges, if you will, with that comparison. But even though I feel like Turbo did, in some ways, was a blueprint of what RPM should not do compared to what Turbo did. And I think when RPM... when they did RPM, they're probably like, don't do what Turbo did when they adapted Car Ranger, where they just didn't know what they were doing with it. So RPM went all out, and they did, well, of course, RPM was very original in its premise, but the only thing they adapted from Go Onger was only the Zord footage. What little Sentai footage of the ground fights, well, again, all of that was all their own stuff for Power Rangers, with the survival of the human race and the apocalypse and stuff in RPM. Turbo, if they had done something, well, if I was to redo Turbo, maybe they should do Turbo like RPM before RPM, where, well, Turbo would still take place in the main Power Rangers universe as usual, to keep that the same. But if there was one thing I would change from Turbo, is keep the Turbo suits and the Zords, but the monsters, well, and whatnot, Porto, Rygog, and Elgar, maybe make them more like their counterparts from from Car Ranger, where Elgar, speaking of which, I haven't talked about him, that conehead, penis head ass nephew of Divatox's, but I'll get to him in a moment. But if I were to fix that, maybe they should have just left Rygog, Porto, and Elgar like their counterparts in Car Ranger. Divatox would be the one that should be more like her opposite counterpart of Beauty Zonette from Car Ranger, and General Havoc, like Linkara said in his history of Power Rangers when analyzing the season, mainly the villains, where General Havoc should be the main villain of Turbo, or Goldgoyle, who Divatox unleashed to destroy the Rangers' Zords in the finale, should be the real main villain and had the big reveal. I mean, we could still have Divatox, but have General Havoc in the earlier point of Turbo for a couple of episodes, and then come back with the Metallosaurus Zords of his, the same. And then after that, then just have Divatox, do what she does, as usual, with her and her little mini plot of building evil Zords, which of course didn't go anywhere, but if only they expanded on that aspect. But then also bring out the big gun to close out the season of Goldgoyle. Because Goldgoyle, I liked how I wish they should have opened him up, but if Saban had used what little O-Ranger footage for that they used for Zeo, and then do what they did with Mighty Morphin seasons 2 and 3, mixing the three different, using the three different Sentais to do unique fight sequences. But since they didn't have the Goldgoyle costume or the Rescue Megazord costume for chasing the space, but they did have the Turbo Megazord suit though. But if Turbo was done like Mighty Morphin season 2 and season 3, that was how I would fix it, is do less of the footage from Car Ranger, just like restrict the fight footages and stuff, the ground fights of the Turbo Rangers versus Divatox's monsters, all American footage, and just have only the fight scenes only being mostly the Zord battles. That's what would be one thing I would fix from Turbo. And also, since I liked some of the stuff the movie did have, even though, the movie is not good, but I did like the Turbo Megazord and individual Zord cockpits that they had in the movie, but they could have used that in the show. And, even though, they had money to save and burn whatever Sentai footage from Car Ranger that they could. But, I do have to admit, as much as I know Turbo Power Rangers movie is, forgettable, but I did amend some things that the movie got somewhat right, that I wish that the show, when Saban did Turbo, they should have did completely something out the box. But again, they have Sentai footage. They have to use certain aspects, elements, concepts, stories, and footage from Car Ranger, but work around that footage for Power Rangers, because the goofiness of Car Ranger was off-putting for many, but what else can you do with Car Ranger? And then we also have to talk about the other negatives about the show. Speaking of Elgar, again, I don't like Elgar. He is annoying, and he's no worse than Divatox, who is his aunt, basically the head villain piratess of the show. But I just feel like if Elgar was more like his counterpart of what's his name from Car Ranger, Zerolda or whatever his name was in Car Ranger. Personally, Elgar should have been like his counterpart in Car Ranger rather than being what he is, and I just kind of wish that, I prefer, this is why I prefer movie Elgar from the Turbo movie than Elgar from Turbo and in space, because, Elgar could have been more like his counterpart from Car Ranger if they played him, he can crack some jokes but at the same time, when something is serious, you have to play stuff serious. There's nothing wrong with stupid, goofy ass Elgar and all that, but look, but the thing is, you need to have a balance with his character. And heck, I didn't like him then. I still don't like him now. Now Rygog, now Rygog may not be maneuverable for ground fights with the Rangers, but even Rygog, I mean, I'm like, why couldn't Divatox appoint him for certain assignments for her conquest of world domination on Angel Grove and the Earth, and also the Rangers? Because Elgar, I get that Elgar has more. Well, I think there's a reason for this. It's because Elgar's costume has too much armor to him, that would and even Porto as well, so that would explain why Divatox would always send Elgar to do a lot of important crap, even if it feels very unimportant. And I just feel like, why keep sending Elgar to do stuff knowing you can't stand your nephew some of the time? So why you got to keep doing that? You know, that's another common thing, you know. And like what Linkara pointed out in his History of Power Rangers for Ninja Storm, and by the way, his History of Power Rangers redo of Ninja Storm is coming up. And when he made that statement about Lothor and Ninja Storm being a male Divatox, you know, I've already made a statement, you know, I've already made statements before about Ninja Storm, where parts of Ninja Storm was like Turbo, but some of it was done right. It's still doing all the sins that was wrong with Turbo, that Ninja Storm did repeat itself, where if Lothor was being an annoying petty villain, space villain, pirate or ninja otherwise, and then you have nieces or nephews who are also space villains, pirate or ninja or whatever, and then you have to deal with their idiocy when you have your right-hand generals who are doing the more serious work like Rygog, Porto, or versus like Zergain or Motordrome or whatever. I've noticed how Turbo and Ninja Storm are very in common with their villains, because like both have very petty, annoying space villains who are the leads of the big bads of their respective seasons, and both have annoying, petty, loudmouth nephews or nieces of their family that you just can't stand, but you send them to fight the Rangers and stuff. And even with some Monster of the Week on the side. And I'm just like, man, come to think of it, Lothor, like Linkara puts it, and even what I've even came to realize, Lothor is a male Divatox, as Divatox was Lothor before Lothor. With boobs, basically. You know, basically Divatox was Lothor with boobs before Lothor was a thing, and before Ninja Storm was a thing. But, you know, but even though, again, Elgar is, and even when it comes to think of it, Elgar was basically Capri and Mara before Capri and Mara was a thing. Wow. You know, when you think about it. And, but personally, like I said, General Havoc should have been the main villain, or even the Gold Goyle monster that they thought, well, even though he was the final monster Divatox would unleash to battle the Rangers to set up what was, you know, paving the way transitioning from Turbo 2 in space. But, you know, I feel like, you know, if there was one thing I would do different with Divatox in comparison. Now, here's another thing I have a problem with Divatox as a con. You know, Divatox may be my first female villain crush in Power Rangers before Astronema or Trakina, but Well, now here's the thing. One of the things I didn't like about Divatox, especially during the first half of Turbo, I understand both Hillary Shepard and Carol Hoyt played her off as annoying, but here's the difference between the two Divatoxes. One was more calculating and cold, the other was just loudmouth and brash and just always just yelling at her cohorts for no apparent reason, like she's yelling at the walls like a crazy cat lady or something. But I like Hillary Shepard for that. Even if people don't like it, but that's fine. But even though I was never really fond of Carol Hoyt's Divatox, but I like Hillary Shepard's Divatox a whole lot more, because Hillary Shepard's Divatox brought more somewhat sex appeal to this pirate space queen role, and while she was also kind of like emulating a female Jim Carrey with some bits of Julie Newmar Catwoman from 60s Batman to some other character, villainous character I can't think of, that she modeled Divatox after. But that's just how I think of Divatox in a way. And yeah, she was sexy as all hell, but also annoying as all hell at the same time. But Carol Hoyt's Divatox, well, she played it off very serious, but she just runs into incompetence in ways because the people she's around. And come to think of it, Divatox, in ways was up there with Rita, even though I don't like Rita personally. But I know there's people who rather prefer Rita over Divatox. But again, but even though Rita, given all her consecutive failures, there were only a few times she succeeded as a villain. And if you go back, for those who remember my I Hate Rita video from 2017 or 2018, and when I discussed about how much I never liked Rita as the very first big bad of Power Rangers, but she was the first female big bad, and I guess people rather prefer the Empress of all evil, Space Witch, over a pirate queen of evil who is just so loudmouth and annoying. And I think that's why when we got to the first episode of Power Rangers in Space, how they brought those two female villains together before we unveiled the true, real, more serious, later Queen of Evil, but previously, actually Princess of Evil, Astronema. And that's one of the reasons why I think, I think after we've had our comic relief villains for a while, you would think after 5 years, going to In Space, it's time that we start getting more serious villains in the fray, like Astronema and Dark Spectre, the Psycho Rangers, and Ecliptor. I think that's one of the reasons why people rather prefer In Space over this season or the other seasons of the Zordon era. Even though Mighty Morphin will remain iconic, but Rita and Zed, in their tenure as villains later on, they got kind of lame. But the only times Rita and Zed peaked as villains, again, was during, like I said back in my I Hate Rita video. For those who remember, especially that one person who commented about how he said he only prefers Mighty Morphin, don't like any of the other Power Rangers. No offense. Well, that's your opinion, whoever you were. But Rita and Zed were at their peak during the third season of Power Rangers, when they found ways to try to defeat the Power Rangers, and it took them 3 years after consecutive failures and a few wins. But season 3, when Rita and Zed were together, they actually succeeded as villains. They destroyed the Ranger Zords. They destroyed their new powers, even though the fate of the Ninja Zords and Shogun Zords will be left unknown after Mighty Morphin. And they actually blew up the command center and all the other things they did. But what did Divatox do in her victory against the Rangers? Well, the only thing I'll give victory that she did during her time as a villain, she had her brother General Havoc steal the Turbo Megazord. That's one thing. And then her brother's army of Chromites would put that battery pack on the Turbo Megazord, and then the Chromites and her Monster of the Week, for that one of my all-time favorite episodes, Clash of the Megazords, would have the Turbo Megazord battle the Ranger's new Rescue Megazord, courtesy of the Phantom Ranger giving them those new Zords as a alternative gift. But then there was also, even though the undisputed defeat of the Rangers and Chase in the Space is very controversial 25 years later, but like I said, if you go back to my commentary track, Chase in the Space, and the way how Divatox defeated the Rangers, I'm like, they just pulled the Empire Strikes Back on us. And again, that finale, for all the ups and downs in Turbo, and despite it being a season of all those flub-ups and missteps, that finale, as epic and transcending to what was supposed to be the last season of the show, that finale was the Empire Strikes Back of Power Rangers. But then again, people wish Divatox never did defeat the Turbo Rangers, but she did. But she never really did squat to defeat the Rangers. And of course, Divatox is the only female villain in the Zordon era that does not fight any of the Rangers directly. Because it was made clear in interviews with Hillary Shepard that when they wrote Divatox's character, they don't want Divatox fighting the Rangers, because that's not her intention. Actually, I don't think that was the intention, to have her fight the Rangers at all. She only discusses the Rangers of what their fate will be here and there, but she never fights them. She never had any much of a fighting prowess. So only Rygog and Elgar had fought the Rangers, and even Piranhatrons and whatnot. But again, her incompetence as a villain is off-putting at times. It doesn't matter who played her, as long as it was the character, and with the off-puttingness of her being incompetent and being an annoying space pirate. But then also, I know I've ragged on about the cons, because again, there's more cons than there is pros to Turbo, but it's just, another thing I still don't like about Turbo 25 years later with Divatox still is, especially during the first chunk of Turbo when Tommy and them was the Turbo Rangers, is the detonation plot of the week. Like, what is up with Divatox and bomb plots? Like, I never really understood that, even as a 5-year-old kid 25 years ago. But as a 30-year-old man who's still been watching Power Rangers for this long, and when coming back to the season, even 25 years later, I still don't get what is up with the theme of her and the world domination thing, the bombs. You would think if her theme is that of her being a space pirate, wouldn't she be out for like certain treasures or anything that would be valuable to her on Earth in Angel Grove somewhere, like some gold and money or anything like that? But like, again, this is a Power Rangers thing. I mean, I don't know any pirates who do world domination, but I know pirates who steal, like Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean or something, which is fictionist. But I just don't know any pirates who do world domination. But I doubt you there will be a pirate who would make a pizza monster. And that's only, again, a Power Rangers thing. But I just don't understand what is up with the bomb stuff in Turbo. Like, if she wants to do this world domination stuff with bombs, then maybe she would just go from being called a space pirate to a space pirate terrorist or something. I don't know. Because, again, the pirate, I mean, you know, Divatox and the bomb stuff is what weighed the first chunk of Turbo down. Do it for at least a few episodes, like 1 or 2 or 3 of them episodes of the first half of Turbo. You don't need to keep doing a detonator plot every goddamn episode. That's what made the first chunk of the first chunk of the season pretty boring and unwatchable if you do the bomb stuff. Well, after TJ, once we had the cast change from Tommy's team to TJ's team, the writers were like, okay, you know, after 19 episodes, once we changed the cast, let's have Divatox not do no more bomb plots anymore. It got pretty annoying and tedious. But, you know, that was another thing that threw me off about her character, and I wish that if they had done Divatox differently, don't do the bomb stuff. Probably just do a detonation bomb for at least one episode to raise the stakes. Not do bomb plots every damn episode when Tommy and them were still the Turbo Ranger. But, like I said, when TJ, Cassie, Ashley, and Carlos became the new Rangers, they had, the writers made it clear, especially Judd Chip Lynn, kudos for Judd Lynn for paving the way in the direction of the series going forward, that they felt that, okay, the writing with Divatox was just repetitive. Let's try not to make her do that every episode. Just stop writing her doing that stuff. Just have her actually do something that she wouldn't do on a regular basis. And, you know, there were a few episodes of Turbo where Divatox did work as a villain, even in the benefit of the second half of Turbo. Because the first half of Turbo, when Carol Hoyt was playing her, it was very repetitive. And I still didn't find Carol Hoyt all that as Divatox, even though when it came to her and her split portrayal of Demetria when it came to the Rangers. Now, even though the plan was for Turbo, which I've already long noticed about from wikis and what fans said and what they intended, even any interviews with Judd Lynn, when it came to any discussion regarding Turbo and some of the plans they intended for, let's say, Divatox. Now, originally, going back to the episode when Visceron, that episode when, you know, the episode when Tanya, when we first saw her, and the only time we would see her working at that as a radio DJ, where in the episode when, when Visceron was introduced in the episode Transmission Impossible, I believe. Yeah, it was Transmission Impossible. In the Transmission Impossible episode, when Visceron, until he got brainwashed by Divatox to be some cartoony looking dishwashing whatever servant, and then when he also was reformed by the Rangers later on at the end of that episode, when Visceron wanted to come to Demetria for a message to Demetria that he has info on who her sister is. Because coincidentally enough, at the same time, Carol Hoyt, while playing Divatox, was playing Demetria. Again, the plan was for Turbo was to have Demetria and Divatox sisters. Well, yeah, in passing the torch, we do see Divatox's mother, Mama D, basically, so they can't come up with a different name for her, so screw it. We don't know who Divatox's and Demetria's father is, so we just have mentions of their father. Maybe probably down the line in Boom Studios Power Ranger comics, in like their Power Rangers Unlimited line of comics, if they do a Divatox one-shot comic about her origins. Maybe down the line in Boom Studios Power Ranger stuff in the comics, they would probably do a comic centered around Divatox and Demetria's origins, and so I can get a good glimpse of what the TV show try and attempt with Divatox's character and Demetria, and so I can see what makes sense in the comics versus what's in the show, even though I haven't been following a lot of Boom Studios Power Ranger stuff lately. Forgive me, guys. I'm even after all these years with me and my Lost Galaxy and Trakina shit, I'm just like, fan film stuff. I'm still a terrible Power Rangers fan for not following the comics all that much. But yet, you know how I am with me and my Lost Galaxy and Trakina stuff. But, think about it. Because, like, if Boom Studios had done a one-shot Power Rangers Turbo centric thing, since they already did a Phantom Ranger comic in the Power Rangers Unlimited book, and even they already did one for, like, Astronema and Ecliptor with that book and the Psycho Rangers and whatnot, maybe they should explore Divatox's origins next, and also explore more about her character and what led her to be that petty, annoying space pirate queen of evil she ended up being over the course of Power Rangers, over the course of Turbo, and in space. Well, there were a few episodes I did like about Turbo that worked for Divatox's benefit, and personally, even when Hilary Shepard came back during the second half by the time of General Havoc's introduction in the Darkest Day episode, Divatox, I think I tolerated her being more annoying and stuff because that's what Hilary Shepard was known for when she played the character. Divatox was supposed to be that annoying loudmouth space pirate queen of evil, because when you switch actresses, the character acts, that's how it is in a lot of TV shows and movie franchises, or even animation when you change voice actors with certain characters. When one person played a certain role to perfection, and when you have someone else playing it, it feels a little off, so to speak. And personally, I rather prefer Hilary Shepard's Divatox, because even if she may be annoying and loudmouth, and with her annoying, loud pettiness, like fingernails screeching on a chalkboard, basically, I can't help it. I'd rather prefer that annoying, petty Divatox than that more cold and calculating, even though she was pretty boring with the world domination stuff. So I hate to say it. Even though there was one episode I did like about Turbo that was Divatox centric. Again, the same episode that was about the Rangers being baked into a giant pizza. It was, Trouble by the Slice was a decent episode regarding Divatox, because this is one of the few instances where Divatox is outside of her subcraft when she's not fighting the Rangers directly. Even though it was a mishap episode where she was going to use a certain ray device thing that Porto invented, where they would switch places. But then when something goes wrong, Divatox is swapped out from her forces onto real life in Angel Grove around civilians. Yeah, she had some memory loss. She had amnesia for that whole episode. And she has to pretend that she was, and then when she goes into that pizza parlor where she works as that guy Mike, what's his name, who would become the Mad Mike pizza monster for the episode. And even though I did find funny about that episode while she was working at the pizza place, and it is disgusting seeing her being so trifling, Peg Bundy style, eating certain pizza toppings and then cook that stuff, and then saying that I like how she was like, she rather like having the pizza toppings raw, but eating the food before passing it and eating it is disgusting. Tossing it to customers is disgusting. But it's a hilarious one-off episode for her. But even though, God, I mean, if they had done this with Hillary Shepard's Divatox and not Carol Hoyt's, it would have been a lot more, okay, it would have been the same thing. But if they amped it up with Hillary Shepard's Divatox and not Carol Hoyt's version. But yeah, but personally, I wish that they would have expanded more on her and Demetria and, why are they sisters to begin with. But even when we get to Countdown to Destruction, when Zordon Z-Wave purified those that were evil to good and while the rest of dust, we see Divatox in a similar wardrobe, similar to Demetria's white gown outfit. But again, hinting the fact that those two were sisters probably at one point, but it was never fully expanded. I've ragged on about Divatox and Elgar and all the other cons a lot, but there's some other cons I don't like about Turbo. Since now we're in 1 hour and 5 minutes into the video, I'm sorry for going on too longer, but it's just there's a lot to talk about Turbo and all the things people hate about the series. If there's one thing I don't like about Turbo for cons is like, when you come to think of it, I know I'm going to come up with a crazy Turbo fan theory later, someone down the line, but there's another thing I don't like about Turbo is, again, there's some things I don't like about Turbo. Again, even like the con with the movie, the show doesn't want to, there were times when the show would do some serious plots, but then is interrupted by the idiocy of Divatox and her forces, especially Elgar. But I'm just like, I wish that if they had done Turbo differently, they should have had a proper balance of what's serious and what's goofy. Now, with Zeo, what I did like about Zeo, they had a good balance of comedy and drama to their stories. Even though Power Rangers, come to think of it, with the first 5 years of the show, the first 5 years of Power Rangers was like some daytime or primetime sitcom with superheroes, basically. That's what the show's first 5 years were. Because given the format of Power Rangers during the first 5 years of, the show until in space. But by Power Rangers in Space, they started being more serious and more cinematic in areas. But when it was Mighty Morphin's 3 seasons, Zeo and Turbo, they were making everything like a sitcom. I think that would explain why Power Rangers was starting to lose its luster with the kids of the 90s at the time. Well, not me especially, but for like the big kids who were the 6 to 12-year-olds at the time watching Power Rangers from Mighty Morphin through Turbo. Where, the comedy slapstick villains was getting a little boring anyway, so by the time Power Rangers in Space came along, it was time the show started, raising the stakes more by giving us more serious villains, serious threats, and a serialized nature to the story of the show. And I think that's why In Space worked, because, well, when we get to the 25th anniversary this year coming up. Because, but yeah, Turbo, it felt like maybe this was Power Rangers running on its, spinning its wheels of comic relief silliness for 5 years. I mean, I minded some of the comic relief stuff in Mighty Morphin and Zeo, but even though this is even though I liked Mighty Morphin Season 3, because the reason why I prefer Season 3 over Zeo and Turbo, because when you go back and watch Mighty Morphin Season 3, you have your Bulk and Skull moments and your Rita and Zed with Rito moments, but I mostly focused on Season 3 for the Rangers' plot and the dangers of what will happen if they lost their powers again. Once Ninjor gave them the powers of the ninja, and then give them the new Ninja Zords, and then with the storyline with Kimberly, that stuff was like a soap opera. And the reason why I liked Mighty Morphin Season 3, because it had that soap opera raising the stakes sort of feel, with not only the Rangers, but also one of their own with Kimberly, and when Catherine came along, and when Rita brainwashed Catherine to steal the pink power coin, and when Kimberly was losing her pink ranger powers, and then when Rita and Zed stole the Falcon Zord and Ninjor, and when Zed pled the Rangers to pilot his evil dormant Shogun Zords, but then Billy would reprogram them to be their Shogun Zords. and then they, and then of course the setting up the set, saying farewell to Kimberly, and then welcoming Catherine to open arms to become the new Pink Ranger, and then the stuff with the Zeo Crystal, Master Vial, and then all of the other stuff they did in season 3. That's one of the reasons why I prefer the 3rd season of Mighty Morphin over the first 2 seasons, because heck, the first 2 seasons of Mighty Morphin were formulaic anyway, but I'll always cherish those seasons, but there were still some things I still don't like from seasons 1 and 2. But the reason why I prefer season 3 was because of the soap opera heavy story stuff that they had. But if Turbo was more like Mighty Morphin season 2 or season 3, and also being like what Zeo did, if Turbo was more like Zeo, and actually if Turbo was a hybrid season, which going back to what I said earlier, if Turbo was a hybrid season like Mighty Morphin was, instead of having the Turbo suits, maybe the Zeo Rangers should have had the Turbo Zords be extension of the Zeo powers. If Divatox did destroy the Turbo, if Divatox destroyed the Zeo Rangers as old Zords, if Divatox had the power to destroy any Rangers' powers, a la Thanos or something, even though, like I said back in that commentary about like Divatox being Thanos before Thanos sort of thing. But even though Divatox, we never saw what powers she would possess other than her detonating bombs to destroy stuff and her Piranhatrons. Even though, like I said, dating back to what I said about pirates and world domination thing. But like Linkara even pointed out, like I said earlier also, what if the Zeo Rangers had the Turbo Rangers as Zords, and the Turbo Zords were new Zords for the Zeo Rangers, instead of like basically using the Turbo suits, but again they have to follow the Sentai footage and back to Sentai footage with Ranger suits to match that footage. Whoops. Instead of hybriding, previous season suits with a new Sentai season's Zords and Monsters, is all I'm saying. But enough of that. Okay, I know this video is going on a little longer, but let's get around some of the pros of the show. There are a few positives of Power Rangers Turbo I'll give the show 25 years later, without a doubt. I loved characters like the Phantom Ranger, because the Phantom Ranger, believe it or not, has one of the dopest looking Ranger suits of all time, and perhaps one of my favorite characters. And fun fact, when I was a kid watching these Power Rangers for Halloween of '97, I was the Phantom Ranger for Halloween that year when these guys, these Rangers were airing. And I did like the mystery around the Phantom Ranger and what kind of character he was, because now originally Car Ranger, I'll discuss this when I discuss the Phantom Ranger next time on the podcast. The Phantom Ranger wasn't really a 6th Ranger in Car Ranger, but so they decided to make him a 6th Ranger in our show. But even though he was only going to be around for a few episodes of Turbo, and we will only see him 1 or 2 more times in space. Blue Centaurian, for all things considered, well, Blue Centaurian was Robo Knight before Robo Knight, but Blue Centaurian, I wasn't fond of his character at first, but he grew on me over time the more I rewatched the season. And since after all, Blue Centaurian, he was around a lot more often than, let's say, the Phantom Ranger. But if also one of the few gripes I still have about the finale is that if Blue Centaurian didn't leave with Demetria to help Zordon, and Phantom Ranger was busy with his own thing while the Rangers were just on their own now. But I just felt like Blue Centaurian should have helped the Rangers, even if the Phantom Ranger should have came along to help fend off against Divatox, so that way they would stop her from destroying the power chamber, since the Rangers already lost their weapons and Zords. So it would have been a great epic battle, and then you would still have your little Empire Strikes Back moment. But the Blue Centaurian, there were a few good episodes about him, even though there was one episode this was from the second half of Turbo. There was one episode or actually it was a 2-parter. There was 2 episodes of Turbo from the second half I did like, where, like, the one time we would ever see Blue Centaurian go berserk by one of Divatox's monsters. But actually, like, brainwashed completely. Yeah, sure, there was when he was buzzing, going crazy by Shrink-a-Sec and Honey, I Shrunk the Rangers, and then later getting shrunk himself. But in the second half of Turbo, when it was that Wishing Coin arc, which was just a two-parter with two separate titles to it, Sowing the Seeds of Evil, or was it? Yeah, or whatever it was. And then there was that other one. And Blue Centaurian went berserk by the Wild Weeder monster. And the Rangers had to fight Blue Centaurian. So again, like I said, Blue Centaurian had something in common, but even like I said with Robo Knight had something in common with Blue Centaurian. But again, Blue Centaurian did it first. Sorry, Robo Knight. But Blue Centaurian, he was all right. I mean, even though I would say he did kind of act more like a more Ninjor-like figure to these Rangers than, let's say, Auric the Conqueror. At least, Auric the Conqueror in Zeo, he wasn't used much often since after Auric was kind of boring. So, good thing they had Blue Centaurian around for long. For a much longer period of Turbo, following from his debut in Millennium Message until Chasing the Space, Part 1. And then we see him again briefly in Countdown to Destruction in space. Now, of all the another pro I like to give Turbo. Well, for the Arsenal, I do like Lightning Cruiser and Storm Blaster as sentient Zord-like vehicles that don't transform as Zords or anything. But I did like the ability that those flying vehicles that they have can fly. Especially Lightning Cruiser, because Lightning Cruiser is like a 2-in-1. It's a car, and it's a car that runs that drives on the ground, and it's a car that can fly like a hover car, basically, and that's how it can be, and also has minds of its own. Because of the two vehicles that TJ and Justin have for the other Rangers they're driving, I actually like TJ's Lightning Cruiser a whole lot more. Nothing against Storm Blaster being the Jeep, but I just like I just love Lightning Cruiser a whole lot more, because Lightning Cruiser it looked more like a Corvette sort of vehicle for a Red Ranger. Megazords. I still like of the two Megazords from Turbo, I do like the Rescue Megazord a whole lot more. If they had started with the Rescue Zords, if I were to redo Turbo, if Turbo was like Mighty Morphin Season 3, if like how Season 3 adapted Kaku Rangers Zords differently, where they did the Shogun Zords later, Ninja Zords first, where suppose if the Turbo Rangers had the Rescue Zords first and the Turbo Zords later, no, not really, but the Turbo Zords, well, they was what they was, but the Rescue Zords had better variations to them. The Rescue Zords would be vehicle formed in individual humanoid Zord form, and then combine into the Rescue Megazord in itself, and then take the Artillotron's arms for cannons, and then use that for the Rescue Megazord. I just like the Rescue Megazord a whole lot more, given its ability and firepower, and also given the amount of strength it has compared to the regular Turbo Megazord. Well, I did amend the Turbo Megazord in the movie, but in the show, not this much this time, because personally, I'm not really a big fan of the Turbo Megazord in general, but I did like some of the aspects they did with it and how it functioned in the movie than in the show, where they had to just go by what was in the Sentai footage. But then again, yeah, and also there's another pro. As bad as the show was, as bad as Turbo was, this is another season of the Zordon era where Ron Wasserman or whoever's music, makes the show still good. Because the fight music for Turbo was pretty good though. There was a few good fight songs for it that was both used in both the show and the movie, like Invincible and Let's Rock and Roll, and those songs like that. But personally, I just felt like Turbo did shine through with the music. However, I'm still not a big fan of Turbo's theme song, while I do mind the whole shift into Turbo. But personally, yeah, it does have a good rock. beat to it as opposed to, let's say, Lost Galaxy or Lightspeed Rescue's themes. Well, one of the reasons why even though Jeremy Sweet did the theme song for Turbo, just like he did for Lost Galaxy and Lightspeed Rescue. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Jeremy Sweet's theme songs for Power Rangers, personally. While they do have some good addictive rock beats to it, I'm just not a big fan of any of those theme songs. That's just my opinion. If you like the Turbo theme song, more power to you. Let's see. What's another thing? Okay, now before I wrap up, let's talk about what are my worst and best episodes of Turbo for both halves. Both the best and worst episodes for Tommy's team of Turbo and the best and worst of TJ's team of Turbo. Okay, let's start with Tommy's team in terms of what was the worst episode from that half and what was the best episode of that half. Okay, if there was one episode that I find the worst from that half of Turbo when it was Tommy's team, it would have to be, I don't want to say Honey, I Shrunk the Rangers. I don't want to say Shadow Rangers either. I would say it would have to be that episode when Justin was, I'm not going to say his birthday episode, but I would say that episode somewhat before it when he was with the roller derby thing, when he had a rival during that derby race with that one stuck-up kid who thought he was so much better at that derby race, that little derby junior go-kart race. I really didn't like that episode during Tommy's Tommy and them's team as the Turbo Rangers. I really didn't like that episode. When that episode when Justin had that derby race with the go-kart, when he was rivaling with that when he had a rivalry with that stuck-up rich boy. Yeah, I didn't like that episode. But there was one at least good episode from the first chunk of Turbo when it was Tommy, Catherine, Tanya, and Adam on the team with Justin. Cars Attacks. Now, Cars Attacks was a good episode. This was before Honey, I Shrunk the Rangers. Jenny Hunter and Catherine, they had this pep talk, which I liked. But then also, I liked the fact that this was the pre-ultimate episode leading up to the two-parters about setting up Tommy and them leaving. And with Honey, I Shrunk the Rangers being the pre-ultimate episode, two-parter before passing of the torch. Cars Attacks was a good episode, though, where Jenny Hunter had a hard time making good friends and stuff like that and couldn't like Catherine as a friend, and how much she was being how Jenny was being a very stuck-up bully around everybody, and also how she was going around stealing stuff from Lieutenant Stone, and how Catherine had to talk her out of it. And again, I did like the quota of that episode. Check out Cars Attacks. That was at least one good episode of the first chunk of Turbo. Okay, on to the worst and best episodes of Turbo for the second half with TJ, Cassie, Ashley, and Carlos. The worst episode definitely would have to go with, of course, the infamous one. The most idiotic episode Power Rangers had ever come up with, even though they had to go by what was in the Car Ranger footage. Even though it was a Diva Talks episode, but it was the worst one. The most infamous episode that is ingrained in all of our minds 25 years later. Trouble by the Slice, where the Rangers got baked into a giant freaking pizza. But actually, that's the WTF episode. I mean, that was actually the WTF infamous episode. Okay, well, the worst episode of Turbo for TJ's second half, for the second half with TJ and them, was obviously the first episode after they had already replaced Tommy and them as the Turbo Rangers. Stitch Witchery, where Ashley made these jackets that were so, I hate to say it, just like everybody said about her jackets, ugly. Well, actually, no, she said it was ugly. And Diva Talks had this monster that would turn Ashley's ugly jackets and have everybody be jerks to each other. Yeah, that was one episode I didn't like, personally. But Trouble by the Slice was the worst, but it was a WTF episode because it's still one of the most infamous episodes for the second half and all of Turbo in a nutshell. and all the weirdness and idiocy of Turbo. Oh yeah, there was another bad episode from the first half of Turbo when it was Tommy's team, The Whole Lie, where Divatox had or whoever had a monster that would have Justin make a bunch of lies, and anytime he tells a lie, even the other Rangers, if they tell lies, Piranhatrons pop up. That was another episode I didn't like from Turbo, even from the first half. Okay, well, there was one good episode from Turbo's second half. And of course, it has to be the finale. And if you want to, Chasing the Space being the best of the bunch, the very best of the bunch. But there was another good episode of Turbo from the second half. From the General Havoc storyline in the Phantom Ranger story. And when Divatox wanted the Phantom Ranger's Ruby. Clash of the Megazords was a good episode. It was a really good fight between the Rescue Megazord and the Turbo Megazord with the two Megazords duking it out. I really like that episode. I still do. But by the second half of Turbo had its, by this point, that's when I knew that TJ and them were worthy of being Power Rangers. But the filler episodes that would follow it before Chasing the Space were same old, blase, but here and there, take it if you will with any of those episodes, but by that point, but Chasing the Space was the best of the second half because that was the two-part cliffhanger setting up what was intended to be the final season of Power Rangers. And like I said, if you want to listen to my, if you want to hear me talk about Chasing the Space, my fan commentary is up today right now. So what can I sum about Turbo? Well, it's already been notorious by a lot of fans in the Power Rangers fandom, old and young, that Turbo was the season that technically almost ended Power Rangers, because coincidentally, Turbo was going to be the season that almost ended the show. If Turbo didn't improve by the second half, Power Rangers would have been almost canceled. So luckily, when they did the changes they did by the second half with passing of the torch, ratings did improve. Otherwise, if the changes didn't improve Turbo, Power Rangers would have been canceled for good. Of course, the reason why Turbo was flunking in the ratings was because Saban's other joint product, Big Bad Beetleborgs, was dominating Power Rangers. Well, luckily, Power Rangers will have their revenge come Forever Red against them Beetleborgs and Forever Red and Wild Force. Because even though that was a little in-joke in my head about that, but I know that a lot of people who were those 12-year-olds that watched Power Rangers at this point had already long stopped watching the show for a long time now at this point. But and even though for those who had already stopped watching and just moved on with their lives now, and some that still watch it and haven't watched it in so long and want to catch up on those seasons now as adults. But I don't blame you. But again, Turbo was Power Rangers' first misstep season. It was a season of a bunch of flub-ups. If they had done things differently, if they would have not did what it did, with all the stuff with all of the mishaps and the missteps, we could have had a decent, solid season. We could have. But without this season, the next season would improve all of the things that Turbo failed to do, hence why In Space was going to be 25 years ago, was going to be the final season of Power Rangers. If In Space didn't succeed, Power Rangers would just end on a certain note, like it was no tomorrow. But without In Space, we wouldn't be where we are with Power Rangers afterward. But though, if Turbo wasn't such a failure of a season, if Turbo didn't do the things it did, we would have had a good, solid season 25 years later.